Hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture on regression plots, reg plots. As usual, we start by importing the libraries and modules that we need. Import NumPy, Pandas, Seaborn, Matplotlib, PyPlat, and we have our special Matplotlib inline function, which will allow us to visualize our plots in Jupyter Notebook. So regression plots are kinds of plots that will allow us to see the relationship between two variables. Let's look at the tips dataset. So we'll use Seaborn's load dataset method, sns.load dataset. We'll be working with the tips dataset. So let's save this in a variable called tips. So if I call the head method on our tips dataset, we have total bill, tip, sex, smoker, day, time, and size. Let's see the relationship between total bill and tip paid. Okay, so Seaborn has a method known as regplot. We'll be calling that method sns.regplot, and we'll pass our x and y axis values or variables. For x-axis, let's use total bill, and for our y-axis, let's use tip. And our data is coming from the tips dataset. So if we run this, we have a regression plot. So total bill on the x-axis, tip on the y-axis. So the scatter points, each of these points are individual data points, and this is a regression line. So this regression line is the best fit line for all of these data points, and we see that there is some relationship between total bill and tips paid, right? So the higher the total bill, the more the tip is paid, the higher the tip paid. Okay, and if we want, we can change the color of our regression plot by passing the color attribute. So we can set the color to, for instance, green, and now we have a green regression plot. And if we want to see some other color, we can change it accordingly, and now we have a red regression plot. Next, let's see an example, and for this example we'll use NumPy's multivariate normal method to create data, to create a normally distributed data. Okay, so first let's define two variables, mean and covariance. We'll set the mean to be 2 and 5, and for the covariance we'll set it to be, let's pass a list containing two numbers. Let's say the first list contains 1.1 and 0.4, whereas our second list contains, let's see, 2.2 and 3. I think those are good numbers. So what we'll do next is use NumPy's multivariate normal method. So np.random, there's a method known as multivariate underscore normal, and we'll pass the mean, the covariance, and number of data points. Let's use 100 data points, and what we'll do is we'll transpose the entire data, and let's save this in variables x value and then y value. Okay, don't worry about this method. I'm just using this method to create a data that will be a good fit for our regression plot. Okay, don't worry about how I am getting this data. I just wanted to use data that will make more of a regression fit. Okay, So we'll save it in two variables, x value and y value. Since we are transposing, we'll have two values, so that we can use x value as our x-axis and then y value as our y-axis. What we can do next is call Seaborn's reg plot method to plot our regression plot, and then for our x-axis we can pass the x value object that we created here, and for our y-axis we can pass the y value object. And okay, let's first see this regression plot and see what it looks like. Okay, so we have a nice regression fit, right? We have a nice regression line here for our data points. So here we are using 100 data points. What you can do is you can change this to different data points and see how your regression line appears, or how your regression plot changes, the best regression line fit changes. Okay, another thing we can do is change the color of our plot by passing the color attribute. Let's set the color to purple, for instance, and we have a purple regression plot. Another thing we can do with regression plots is use series objects as our x and y axis, and then draw a regression plot using x and y variables that we got from our series objects. Let's see how we can do that. So we can use pandas series method to create a series, and we can pass this x and y values that we created here. So pd.series, let's pass x value and then name of our series, name for our series, let's say variable x, var x, or you can give it any other name, and we'll save this in a variable called x value, or let's say series x value, and let's do the same for our y-axis. Let's call it series y value, and we'll call pandas series method and pass the y value object we created above, and then we can give it a name. So name, let's set it to be variable y. Once we have that, we can pass the series x value and series y value as our x and y axis for our regression plot. Let's do that. So sns.regplot, and then for our x-axis we'll pass series x value, and for our y-axis we'll pass series y value. Let's run this. Okay, so here we have our x-axis variable x, y-axis variable y. You can change this to some other variable or name, and we have a regression plot here, a regression line for our data points. Okay, if you want to use a different marker for your individual data points, you can pass the marker attribute and set a different marker. Let's see an example of that. Let me copy this line, paste it here, and we can add the marker attribute and set it to, let's say, diamond. If you want to see a diamond for your scatter plots, now we have a diamond. And you can also pass the color attribute, and pass another color that you want. Let's say gray. Run it. Now we have a gray regression plot. And some other markers are like the plus sign, circle, and so on.